In a quiet Hmong village nestled deep within the mountains, there lived a young couple, Otso and Zai Li. Their love was the kind that inspired envy, a bond so pure that it seemed blessed by the spirits themselves. They had been married for 5 years, and though they had a happy life together, they had yet to be blessed with a child. Each day, they prayed to the spirits, visited shamans, and offered sacrifices at the village altar, pleading for the gift of a child. Their prayers were finally answered one humid summer evening. Zai Li began to feel the early signs of pregnancy. The village celebrated with them, as the news spread like wildfire. They believed this child would be a blessing, a gift from the spirits to continue their bloodline. Tso was ecstatic, preparing the house, building a cradle from bamboo, and crafting small toys from wood. Everything was perfect. But as the pregnancy progressed, something unsettling began to happen. Zai Li's belly swelled much larger than expected, and she became ill with each passing month. Dark circles formed under her eyes, and her once beautiful face grew gaunt and pale. The village healer could find no explanation. "Sometimes, a baby takes more from the mother," she said. "Perhaps the child is destined for greatness, and such things come at a cost." In the final month, Zai Li could hardly move from her bed. She began to have strange dreams, nightmares, really, of a child with eyes as white as milk, skin cold as death, and an aura of darkness surrounding it. In the dreams, the child would reach out to her, but every time she tried to embrace it, it would vanish like smoke. She would wake up each night drenched in sweat, her heart pounding in her chest, but she kept these dreams secret from Otso, fearing it was just her anxiety about the birth. When the time finally came, the birth was not a peaceful one. Zai Li screamed through the night, her cries echoing throughout the village. The midwife worked tirelessly, beads of sweat dripping down her face. It was a long and brutal labor, and as dawn began to break, the child finally emerged. But the silence that followed was deafening. No cries of joy, no wailing of a newborn baby. The midwife gasped and dropped the child. There, lying in the cradle, was a baby girl, if you could even call her that. Her skin was gray and cracked, like old clay left to bake in the sun. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, as if they didn't belong to a living creature. Her hair was coarse and stuck out in tangled tufts, framing a face that looked far too old for a newborn. Her arms and legs were stubby and bent at unnatural angles, and her fingers were small, twisted claws. The most unsettling part was her eyes. They were not the bright, innocent eyes of a baby but milky white and empty, as if they were looking through you rather than at you. Tso recoiled in horror, his face paling at the sight of his daughter. Zai Li, too weak to move, stared in disbelief as tears streamed down her face. This can't be," she whispered, her voice breaking. The midwife muttered something under her breath, making a quick sign of protection before backing away. "The spirits," she murmured, "they have cursed this child." Tso shook his head. "This isn't my daughter. This isn't human." From that day, the village shunned them. The people who once celebrated the coming of their child now whispered behind their backs, calling the baby cursed, a demon, a punishment from the spirits. They began to avoid Otso and Zai Li's home, even crossing the road to the other side to avoid passing it directly. Otso could no longer bring himself to look at the child. He refused to hold her, refused to call her by a name. But Zai Li, despite her fear, could not abandon the little girl. She named her Xia, after the faint light of the morning dawn, hoping it would drive away the darkness that surrounded her birth. As months passed, Xia didn't grow as a normal baby would. Her body remained grotesquely small and deformed, her skin cracked further with each passing day. She didn't cry, didn't laugh, didn't even blink. She just stared, her milky white eyes watching, always watching. Zai Li began to notice strange things happening around her. The shadows in the house seemed darker, and the air colder. Sometimes, in the dead of night, she would hear Xia whispering, though she was still too young to speak. One night, Zai Li woke up to the sound of a soft giggle, like that of a young girl. It was the first time she had heard anything resembling joy from Xia. Relieved, she rose from her bed and walked to the cradle. But as she approached, the giggling grew louder, and the room became unbearably cold. When she reached the cradle, Xia was gone. Panicked, Zai Li searched the house, her heart racing. She found Xia sitting in a corner, staring up at her with those blank, white eyes. In her hand, Xia held something small and dark, a dead bird. Zai Li screamed, backing away in horror. Xia's giggling stopped, and the air grew still. For the first time, Xia's expression changed. She smiled, but it was not the innocent smile of a child. It was something far more sinister, filled with malice and unnatural wisdom. Ah Tso, hearing the commotion, stormed into the room. When he saw the scene, his face contorted in rage. "This thing is no daughter of mine," he said, grabbing Xia and carrying her outside. "Ah Tso, no." Zai Li pleaded, but her husband was beyond reason. He took Xia to the edge of the village, near the dense forest where the villagers believed dark spirits roamed. Without another word, he left her there, alone in the cold, under the light of a pale, sickly moon. Zai Li was inconsolable, but deep down, she couldn't argue with what Atso had done. The child was unnatural. She felt it in her bones. But that night, as they slept, the wind howled through the house, and something scratched at the door. The sound was soft at first, but it grew louder, more insistent, like fingernails raking across wood. When Atso opened the door, Xia was there, sitting on the doorstep, her milky eyes fixed on him. Her cracked skin looked worse now, as if her time in the forest had made her decay even more. And in her small hand, she held the same dead bird. Ah Tso slammed the door, his heart pounding. "It's not human," he whispered, terrified. "We've been cursed." From that night on, they could never escape her. No matter how far they tried to leave her in the wilderness, Xia always returned, sitting silently at their doorstep, waiting. As the years passed, the house became a place of darkness and despair. Zai Li, once a vibrant woman, grew old before her time, her face hollow and haunted. Ah Tso, consumed by guilt and fear, stopped speaking altogether. The village pretended they didn't exist, but everyone knew, everyone whispered about the cursed child that wouldn't leave. And Xia. She never grew. She remained forever a twisted, deformed child, always watching with those dead eyes, her presence a living curse that no one could ever escape. One day, many years later, the house was found abandoned. No trace of Ah Tso or Zai Li remained, except for Xia, sitting alone in the corner, holding that same dead bird in her clawed hands, smiling that cold, cruel smile as if she had been waiting for someone else to find her. And perhaps she was still waiting.